Hello, this is Chiron and
Hello.
I'm Aaron.
Oh,
Uh-oh.
yeah, you froze for a second, but you're back. We're back. We're here.
Yeah, so we were just talking about this book that I got, The Lost Zodiac of Rudolf Steiner. So there's a picture of it. I'll probably put the image up in the podcast for people who are watching. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I was just saying, I guess within anthroposophy,
Uh-huh.
which is Rudolf Steiner's system of spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
I guess so within that community, apparently there's debate about his take on astrology,
Mm-hmm.
whether he used the tropical zodiac or the sidereal. And
Uh,
I've just I read an appendix, one of the appendix entries for this book. In the introduction, so far that's it. And so I guess from what I can tell, he used the sidereal zodiac for the what do they call it? The bioagricultures that he did.
huh.
His type of farming. The word's blanking, or I'm blanking on the word. But then he used the tropical zodiac for like personality of the soul, spirit kind of thing. He saw the tropical zodiac apparently as like an ethereal or etheric zodiac.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then he saw the sidereal as more like affecting plants and animal life.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. Wild. And I'm just kind of thinking about how that compares in some way with like the Vedic perception or some of the perceptions now about the difference between the sidereal Vedic as being kind of reading the soul or the deeper layers of karma, and then the tropical being more of the personality and more the fruit of this lifetime, um, more of the current experience of this life versus all the layers of the soul that sidereal has. So that's kind of interesting because he was positing almost that the sidereal was more general or more reflective of you said plants and kind of the nature of earth and earth reality versus the tropical
Yeah.
being connected to the personality of the individual.
It's the etheric zodiac.
Yeah, etheric. Okay, yeah, or etheric. Yeah,
It
it's
would be
like the
etheric. Yeah.
well, I think of ether because like ether
Yeah.
is the fifth element, right?
Yeah.
So that's just how I would say it, but I don't know. Yeah,
It's probably you can say it both ways.
probably so. It's what
So,
is it? 6 one way.
and this book is interesting. It's written by Adrian Anderson, PhD.
Ah,
And
okay.
apparently he's made some pretty interesting claims in here in this book. Because he
Oh
wrote
yeah,
another book. I am totally not prepared to be talking about
you're
this on a
fine.
podcast. Because I just looked at this book. I just got it. We opened some gifts this morning.
Yeah,
And I
that's
just
okay.
started looking at it. And
Yeah,
um,
yeah. You're
but
kind
there
of
were some,
exploring it as you
yeah,
like just starting to explore it. Mm-hmm.
yeah. And there's some just really, so uh, it could be an episode, but I would want to have come to prepared with like highlights and notes and stuff like a typically
Yeah,
to
yeah,
cover it. And same with the
yeah.
Immortality Key.
Uh-huh. Yeah. We should do
So,
that though because Steiner's interesting and like
oh
the
yeah,
Theosophists and their connection to astrology, and then from what I know he broke away from them, and then like you said he went into was it aposophy, but he broke away.
anthroposophy.
Anthroposophy. Okay, there you go.
Yeah, I think
So
that's right.
yeah, and when I got to England, when I was in England, one of the first things that I found, I was on a bus. I like landed in England. I was going to study with the one of the astrologers I had met in the astrological community in England because the like Steiner is pretty well known in certain parts of England and studied, and like they have a lot of the Steiner schools there and stuff. Um, but the first thing I found on the bus, I was the only one on the bus, back of the bus, looked under the seat, and there was a book on Rudolf Steiner. And it was like really cool because I'd never heard of him, and I started studying it and then, or reading the book and kept the book. And then later, he came up in different discussions and stuff like that. So but I haven't, studied him like deeply and extensively. So, but I know there's a lot of connection to the astrological world. And so that's neat. I didn't know that about the zodiacs that he created. I bet that book's going to be interesting. So maybe we can talk about it at some point.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I'm just in the middle of a whirlwind of study currently. Mm-hmm. I started back on the Eleusis, the mysteries of ancient Greece, the Eleusinian Mysteries. I picked back up and read this book, The Road to Eleusis, and which was written in 1978 and was a bombshell at the time. And so essentially it was positing that the mysteries, the Kukion, which was the potion that they drank, the bombshell was that these four men, one of which was Wasson, Ruck, and then the guy who synthesized LSD is the one whose name I'm blanking right now. He's a Swiss chemist, and they wrote this book. Wasson was started the whole, at least in the West, in modern times. He's the one that started exploring psilocybin in like Mexico, the mushrooms, in the 50s.
Wow.
And then that's going to drive me nuts. I can't.
Was it Hoffman? Was it?
Yeah, I think that's right. Yep.
Okay, I just did a quick search, but yeah, that's what came up.
Yeah, that's it. This book, they were just saying the Kukion had used ergot, which is a fungus that grows on barley.
Oh.
Like grows on grain. And that's what was going on at Eleusis, is that they were making a hallucinogenic potion using ergot. And that's what explained the fantastical things that we're seeing at the, during the initiation.
Wow.
At Eleusis. And at the time, in 1978, it apparently was a horrible time to come out with something like that academically, or even just in general, because like, Nixon just declared the war on drugs, like,
right.
Just before this came out. So it was like drugs were like, public enemy number one in America. And so the classicist that was involved, Ruck, he got basically blacklisted. He was teaching at like Boston University so anyway, he pretty much, but he was tenured, so they couldn't fire him, but he just became like blacklisted in the classicist community.
Wow.
But anyway, so this book, The Immortality Key, is Brian C. Muraresku, who speaks, he was classically educated, but he speaks Greek, Latin, and Sanskrit. So he went to school for that. But we were talking about The Road to Eleusis and the Immortality Key, which I told you, I've listened on Audible. I've listened to the Immortality Key twice, but it was a few years ago, because the book was published in 2020. But I didn't listen to it, I think, until 2023. And so now I'm reading it for the first time, like the hard copy. And I have found that that's way different than listening. Like when you listen to a book, as opposed to, at least for me, like as opposed to reading it, I don't know. It's like, in some ways it's like I've never read this book before because I haven't read the book. I've listened to it.
Can I ask you something? Because I'm curious.
Yeah.
So maybe
it's like 400 pages. So, I mean, it's a long book, but yeah. So.
Okay. So
he spent 10 years writing, researching and writing. So it's a heavy book and there's a lot in it, but yeah, go ahead. Ask a question.
Yeah. So the Immortality Key, it kind of implies, what it sounds like, that there's some kind of, in terms of the overarching idea, is this Immortality Key book connected to the Eleusinian Mysteries? I'm guessing yes.
Oh yeah, it's explicitly about that. So the premise of the book is the pagan continuity hypothesis with a psychedelic twist. That's how he puts it. The pagan continuity hypothesis being essentially that Christianity was just a continuation of the Greek pagan, essentially, experiment, or
Mm.
which itself goes back further. So it's called the religion with no name, right? It goes back like apparently he talks about like the Neanderthals and what they were doing and
Mhm.
what we know that they were doing with
Mm.
spiritual like practices, and so it goes back that far, right? This religion with no name. So the
Mm.
pagan
Mhm.
continuity hypothesis is basically that this thing that started like that long ago, hundreds of thousands of years ago,
Mhm.
continued,
Mm.
and ended up at Eleusis, and this idea of the kukion, which is
Mhm.
the psychedelic beer, essentially, because in Eleusis
Mm.
it was a beer, right? And then
Mhm.
the hymn to Demeter, I guess Homer writes that it's the ingredients are water, barley, and mint.
Mm. Mhm. Wow.
But the ergot is a fungus, which happens to be purple, by the way.
Huh.
And so Demeter and Hades both were associated with the color purple, which that's, I
Uh-huh.
believe, what Plutonus means is purple in Greek.
Hmm.
So there's this, and so Pluto and Persephone and Demeter and Dionysus and Hecate, all these figures of myth,
Mm.
right? They all come together at this myth, the mysteries of Eleusis, right? And it's the rape of Persephone.
Mhm. Mhm.
So where it's the majority of the book is about, so like what started with the road to Eleusis, which was R. Gordon Wasson, Albert Hoffman, and Carl A. P. Ruck.
Mhm.
Right. So you had Gordon Wasson. So the premise of that book was essentially that the Kukion was psychedelic,
Mm. Mhm.
right? That the initiates drank during the
Right.
mysteries.
Uh-huh. Okay. Huh.
So with the Immortality Key, because like it's 40 years later, and the Immortality Key picks up to essentially proves that yes, indeed, the Kukion was psychoactive because
Mhm.
of ergot, and then also that essentially Jesus was Dionysus,
Hmm.
and like the early Christians, like just because it was, I mean, you got to think, like, and he points out, like Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were written in Greek.
Hmm. Wow.
Paul, the main father that traveled the Mediterranean world, proselytizing this new faith. All of the
Mhm.
books that he wrote, like Corinthians, Ephesians, like all these books, they were
Mhm.
letters to Greek speaking people written in Greek, because it's the
Ah.
Hellenistic world, at the
Right.
end of the Hellenistic anyway, right? Because
Right.
that's
Right.
essentially like you have Rome comes to power, all right, Jesus is sacrificed, all that happens, and it's like the turn of the Hellenic into the Roman at that point in
Mhm.
time. But at that point in time, the
Hmm.
Western world spoke Greek, right?
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
So it's
Hmm.
not really a stretch to say that yeah, Jesus was Dionysus, because well, what you had happen was the Emperor Theodosius, he outlaws pagan practices because it's
Right.
when the Roman Empire embraces Christianity and essentially
Hmm.
uses it to control the population of the world. Right, that was like the
Right.
official the Roman, you know like Roman
Hmm.
Catholicism, essentially. Like the Roman Empire embraces Christianity. Now it's like illegal to practice
Hmm.
as a pagan, but everybody's pagan. You can't just
Mhm.
because you're a Roman Empire and you say, "Oh, this is illegal now. Everyone's Christian now." It's like, no, they're not. Everyone's still pagan. So it's like at that point, Dionysus, at least in the Greek world, the mysteries were really Dionysian, and it was the sacrament was wine, right?
Mm.
And that because
Wow.
there's a shift in the ancient world from beer. What they were having in Eleusis was grain, right? It was ergot, it was beer, but that changes through time, and it becomes wine. And at the time, at that time, wine was what everyone was drinking. Now it wasn't. Eleusis was still happening, but also Eleusis gets shut down, and it's the whole thing. The mysteries go underground, but they do it as a Dionysian thing, not as a Persephone, Demeter, Eleusis mysteries thing.
Follow. Yeah. So this is really interesting. And then you have like Jesus turning the water into wine and some of this symbolic, because that was sort of where my mind was going, is like, ooh, now like I want to unpack kind of the connection between Jesus or Christ and Dionysus. But even before, so the when you say, though, before we move on, though, I just want to clarify, when you say that that it's done in a Dionysian way, that it's suppressed, what do you mean, as opposed to like a Persephone, or, when you talk about its kind of distinct connection to Dionysus, when it is suppressed by the Christian church in the, 4th century now? So like when it starts to be restricted, and like these mysteries are no longer open, right?
Yeah, so you got to go back further, actually, right? And that's why he does in the Immortality Key. It starts, like, he doesn't start there, but it goes all the way back to, like I said, the Neanderthals and what they were doing, like the early Homo sapiens, like that were practicing, like what we were doing, like the funerary practices, right? Because Eleusis is a funerary. It's about Hades. It's about hell. It's about dying. So the whole thing is, right? And I'm going to paraphrase the best I can here, because so it's die before you die, and when you die, you don't die. That's the whole Eleusinian Mysteries. That's what it's about.
Oh my gosh.
It's like they're going to Hades, like literally where the Eleusinian Mysteries were done, where the initiates would have, like where the where like the temple was, where this happened. It was like the gate of Hades was there, like the entrance to this cave, and it was seen as like where Persephone came up. And so what you have over time, because you're talking about thousands of years, right, of these mysteries. Well, towards the end, it becomes more about, because Dionysus is more of a younger god in ancient Greek practice. He came along later. Dionysus did.
Yeah.
And that's when you see him becoming. That's why there's so many different tellings of the Dionysian myth, right? But you see him. He's born in Hades, and he's born to Persephone, who is Demeter, who is Demeter, and also Hecate. Right? They're all the same figure. It's just a different stage of Persephone's the maiden, Demeter's the mother, Hecate's the crone. So what happens is you have the shift. So Dionysus starts becoming more part of the mysteries, and then it shifts more to be about the Maenads and the Dionysian mysteries, and which are still, because it's attached to Demeter and Eleusis and Persephone, because he's the child born in Hades.
He's like
you
the
see
bridge.
in Jesus too.
Yeah,
you see Jesus too. Like Jesus goes into hell after he's crucified.
Yeah, and
so
the echo.
There's all
I
these
can
parallels.
hear the echo of the message of Jesus. Like
it's
hear
the same.
Like,
It's because it's the same story. It's just it evolved, right? The telling and the over time, and so you have a shift from beer, basically, which one of the chapters in here is graveyard beer, right? Which is like goes back. Göbekli Tepe is the name of the place. It goes back that far, which is like 12,000 years ago, where there's proof at Göbekli Tepe. I think I'm saying that. Yeah, Göbekli Tepe. There's proof there that they were brewing beer. And in fact, there's this debate between which came first, beer or bread. What was the first technology? Which was what was responsible for mankind leaving behind nomadicism or hunter-gathering to become agriculturalists? Was it bread or beer? And the argument that it looks like it was beer, actually. Beer, we started brewing beer first. That's what caused man to domesticate.
Beer.
And beer was before wine. Wine came later. And so around the time of Jesus, right, wine at that point, wine became the drink that everyone was drinking, and that was Dionysian. He's the god of wine. So there's a difference between Demeter and the Kukeion being grain-based beer, and then the Kukeion being Dionysian and wine-based, but both being psychoactive, likely still because they're spiked wines. Basically, they're the wines of the Greek. The Greek wines were diluted, right? They would dilute their wine by 8 parts water, 1 part wine kind of thing. Like they didn't drink it full, strength, but even still, highest it could possibly be is 14% alcohol because of fermentation. At 14% alcohol, it kills the yeast, right? So you can't go past that in ancient times. But they spiked it with all different types of psychoactive compounds.
Right.
But in the case of Eleusis, it was ergot, which is how Hoffman synthesized LSD using ergot.
Right. But this is interesting because what could seem like two very different characters, Dionysus, the god of wine, or Bacchus, and the psychopomp. But if you think about the deeper underlying structural component of it and what Jesus, like the character of Jesus, if you look at his relationship, even, when he has dinner with the apostles, breaks bread with the apostles, like the taking water or taking wine at every Catholic mass, you take communion and it's bread and wine and it's symbolic, but obviously there were a lot of very deep practices happening around that time that even though Jesus is kind of constructed or seen in a very pure, almost like sober light, that, that would seem very different than Dionysus. Perhaps that is not the case. They're not so different after all.
No, not in the least. It's just kind of how history played out. But to bring it to Jesus specifically is the Eucharist.
Right.
And initially, because what you saw in Eleusis, it was priestesses who made the Kukeion. Priestesses who made the psychoactive drink. Right? It wasn't priests, it was women. So, and with the Maenads, they're women. And in fact, initially with Dionysian Mysteries, you couldn't even be a male and be involved. That happened later when initially it was just women. It was like witches, women's rights, essentially. So the Eucharist initially would have been priestesses, and it would have been psychoactive wine that you took.
Yeah.
And bread, right? You see again the echo of Demeter and, the grain goddess. So they're both present in the Eucharist.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
And so initially this would have been done in secret, it would have been done at night in people's homes. Like the early Christians would have been taking the psychoactive, Eucharist, and it was still a mystery. It was the mystery still. The patriarchy, the Roman Empire removes the psychoactive compound.
Right.
Because that empowers people.
Right. That's right.
Why do you need the church and the priest and God and all of that when you can just get the fruit yourself? And you see that with the tree, the Garden of Eden, and the tree of good and evil, or the tree of knowledge, like you said, the apple, right, being the fruit, right? If you don't eat that, right? Well, because what happens if you eat it? Well, if you eat it, you become enlightened.
Right. Yeah.
That becomes demonized, though, right? It becomes a matter of good and evil, but that's not, and originally it wasn't the intention. It's not what it was showing. It was showing spiritual enlightenment.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, and so I just was I was trying to recall because I don't have good biblical recall, but just a couple quotes around that just I found on a quick search is for that supposedly from Matthew 16:25, for those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life will find it. And then, speaking of the grain imagery, another one from John, very truly, I tell you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains just a single grain. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. So
Mm.
the death and rebirth, death of the old self or death of the ego that we talk a lot about with like psychoactive or hallucinogenic experiences, that
Hmm.
there's like an ego death that happens. Um, and so the symbolic language that a lot of times in modern Christianity people take very, very literally, and attach directly to like, Jesus's death is our salvation. And, there's a really literal way of interpreting that. But even today, with especially since Uranus went into Taurus in 2018, there's been a revival of the plant medicine ceremonial kind of healing ritual that is very much underground and does happen in private to this day. And it is like a revival of the feminine as well, because you have a lot of, a lot of like feminine kind of like shamanistic work, like, they call themselves by very many different names, but they're kind of bringing that experience of psychedelics to people in a way that is ritualistic and sacred. Now, obviously there may be a lot of differences, but it's just interesting when you talk about how strong the feminine was with that, and sort of the experiences that I've seen since 2018 with Uranus in Taurus. And then, the fact that then it kind of got filtered into the more masculine. Like, would you say that like you're talking about that shift between the Eleusinian and then the Dionysian? So what do you think happened there? Or do you
Well, I
think it was
think
just like an evolution? Mhm.
the shift into the masculine is because of the Roman Empire
Ah, mhm,
and using
mhm,
Christianity as a cudgel to
mhm,
to enslave the
mhm.
populace and like
Yeah.
brainwashing wise, like it's like
Control, power. Mhm,
control and power. Yeah, that's what it's about. But that's not
mhm,
what it's about, really. But
mhm,
that's always been the difference in Christianity, right? Like there's Christians who observe the red words that the god of wine spoke, and then there's the
mm,
ones that observe all the others, you know,
mhm,
the hellfire and brimstone and this angry, wrathful God,
mhm.
you know,
Yeah,
who do what I say or I'll kill everybody, kind of thing.
yeah, yeah,
That's more
yeah.
Roman, right? Like to do what we say or we're going to kill you, as opposed
Mm,
to the mysteries being more of a feminine. Yeah, it's more, but it's also chthonic, right? Because when you're talking about Eleusis, you're talking about Hades, you're talking about beneath the earth, you're talking about the earth element, you're talking about,
mm.
that's why it's a negative polarity in astrology, the earth element, it's feminine,
Right,
it's yin
right.
of
Yeah.
the earth, in the earth, like not the sun, right? Not, the
Mhm,
spirit or,
mhm,
coming from outer space.
mhm,
The
mhm.
spiritual realms like that. Like this is more soul level. Not to
Yeah.
say it's not spiritual. I mean, which is another area I've been looking into a lot, the Neoplatonists and kind of how their conception of reality um
Mm. Hmm.
really speaks to
Interesting.
me in a lot of ways.
Hmm.
That to explain sort of these levels of existence, which
Right,
I don't want to
right.
get into right now because I
Yeah,
don't feel like I could do it justice again.
yeah,
I,
yeah.
I like to be
But
prepared with notes.
yeah, yeah, it's easy to wanna go in those directions, but it's like bringing the reins back in, right? And kinda doing it in due time. But yeah, that would be very interesting to kind of go into as well. Yeah, I was just thinking of another, it's so it really, this the way that you're laying this out and kind of making this connection, it's so wild because a lot of the symbolic language that is used then um, in the New Testament starts to take on a whole different dimension of meaning, and
Oh yeah.
it's another quote is, no one can enter the kingdom of God without being born of water and spirit. And it's like, what is that? Because I've always read that and been like, obviously, even because my involvement in my like Christian upbringing, that was all symbolic. I didn't know what it was talking about. It's like, what do you mean water and spirit? How do you enter a kingdom with, like it just, but when understanding alchemy even allows that to be a little bit more figurative. But then even what you're describing, it could be quite literal in and of its own if you go back far enough, because yeah, it's
Well,
just,
yeah, with the elements
uh-huh.
always, but that's in the Bible. I mean, come on. That's why it's so important really to start understanding even the
Mm,
Bible.
right.
You have to
Mhm.
understand it was written in Greek, at least if we're talking
Right.
about the New Testament,
Right.
right?
Right.
But
Yeah.
even the Hebrews were
Mm,
influenced, right, by
mhm,
Plato
mhm, mhm.
and Pythagoras and the ancient
Uh,
Greeks. I mean,
uh-huh.
even back then, it was still even before Alexander, you know.
Mhm. Yeah.
So
Huh.
understanding where we're at now, you have to understand the influence of the Greeks, and that's why
Mm,
the classics, to be educated
mhm,
and to have read
mhm,
the Greeks, you know, it's the foundation of what the world has become. Now,
mm.
a lot of people want to push back on that. Oh, what about, South America or
Right.
Africa, right? Or the Aboriginal peoples in Australia, like,
Right.
or
Mm,
the Eastern world,
mhm.
you know? Uh,
Right. Yeah.
so, but if the fact is how history played out in the Western world, like technology in the Western world was started with Pythagoras and Plato and Aristotle.
Mm, mhm.
It's the whole thing of all of Western history is a footnote to Plato or Aristotle, you know.
Right. Right.
And so yeah, just
Yeah. It
the
almost,
Bible.
in some ways, it has to do with, it's not about like negating alternate or those other realities. It's almost like in terms of the position that it had in the development of civilization, it's something to be aware and pay attention to. It's not that you're saying it's the only important knowledge or information or way of understanding or language, but the contribution that it made on an ontological and epistemological, if we're talking about philosophy, our ways of understanding what the world is, it gives narrative and it gives story to and language to that. It's not the only way. It's not the only one.
Right.
But
It
yeah,
just
I
happens
completely
to be
understand.
the one. Just like if you think about the influence Christianity has had on the Western world
I mean, yeah, the influence. That's a good way of putting it. It's like it's not about importance, it's about influence and
and history.
recognizing. Yeah,
In
yeah.
fact, that is why history is so important. At least one of the reasons why, right? History is
Mhm.
so important. And why you
Mhm.
shouldn't rewrite history.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so what I'm saying is, the Greek is so important because it's foundational to what the Western
Mhm.
world became and what it is.
Mhm.
That's what I'm saying.
Mhm.
And if you really want to
Yeah.
understand all of the things from now to,
Yeah.
the beginning of civilization, essentially.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, obviously you would start in Mesopotamia. Yeah, so the first time in the Western world um that all of this came together is the thing. That's
Would
Alexandrian
be when?
Egypt. Yeah, it's 323 BC. So the death of Alexander the Great, 323 BC, and the death of Cleopatra the Seventh in 30 BC.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah.
That's why I was
Mhm.
like, that's the Alexandrian Hellenic. That's the Hellenistic period.
Right, right. Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
and then after that, you have the Romans take over. Well,
Uh-huh.
a lot of what the Romans did was just continue the Hellenistic, the Greek, like the Romans looked up to the Greek culture. and copied it.
Mm-hmm.
They saw the Greeks as more sophisticated
Yeah.
than themselves when it came to culture, like when it came to knowledge,
Right.
philosophy. That's Greek.
Yeah.
That word is a Greek word, philosophy.
Yeah.
And that continued for another 800 years. You know,
Hmm.
um,
Yeah.
arguably, it still is like happening, right? Because there's still the Eastern Orthodox is still Roman essentially. So it's not like it went away. I mean, modernity happened and that changed it, right? So, in other words, the Industrial Revolution, right? The Enlightenment and the Industrial Revolution is when the Roman sort of, I would say the Roman, although you see it come back anyway at that time period, because it gets lost, right, in the Dark Ages. There's that period in the Dark Ages where that's why it's called the Dark Ages, because we lost the classics. It became Enlightenment because the classics came back and we started studying the Greeks again. I mean, at least in
they
Europe.
reemerged. Right. Reemerged to shine light and
So see how we talk about history, the periods of time that in history are what's in common, right? The Greeks, and the Latin and the Greek,
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. And
it's just it's not a matter of saying one's better, or like you were saying, like it's not about, oh, the Greeks are better than South American, shamans, or South American history or Mexican history, or you know what I mean? It's not anything, or African for that matter. Like we all came from Africa anyway.
Yeah. And it sort of speaks to, I think, the idea of the universality of, and part of why the archetypes, even like from a Jungian standpoint, or like a historical, like a Campbell perspective, right? Of universal archetypes that we as humans experience, that it may matter, the dressing of the story and the characters might differ, but that the underlying themes are similar, and to kind of go to the Eleusinian mysteries a little bit with the key figures there. And we have, so like Dionysus, would you consider that to be one of the characters, or would you say that's almost like, I mean, as you said, it's a child of Demeter, right? Yeah.
Well, Persephone.
Yeah, child of Persephone. That's right. Yeah. So, but I mean, in terms of like Demeter and what she represents, and Persephone and Hades and the symbolism there and the archetypal energies there, that there are probably, and I shouldn't even say probably, definitely myths around the world that may not have been represented because they weren't part of the canon of surviving just literal written texts, because some of those cultures, they were oral tradition, they were, information was passed down through oral tradition. And so we didn't have maybe records of that, but there are similar, I'm sure, narratives. And so what is happening with like on a thematic and a mythical archetypal level with the myth of Demeter, Persephone, Hades, and how does that translate to the human experience, and also healing, and the idea of having psychoactive substances as part of that is just absolutely fascinating to me, as like a given that it was naturally part of what was going on, and how people crossed the threshold that we think of as the underworld, or how in some ways to have the ego broken down, or have a death within life, and be able to survive it and transform through it. I mean, we have this conversation, and we've talked a lot about our Pluto transits, right? And so in astrology, it's a really powerful experience that people go through when they have a Pluto transit, right? And so they're being initiated into that experience. So yeah, what do you think, as far as in your deep dives that you've been doing with some of the, I would say, historical, it's a historical analysis, but it's more than that, isn't it? I mean, it has a lot of theoretical, kind of
mythical
and mythical but he posits and makes theories, doesn't he? Like
Oh,
around.
you talking about in the Immortality Key?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
that's a historical as much as it can be, right? Because that's the
yeah.
thing with Eleusis. It was the best kept
Uh-huh.
secret in the world.
Mm-hmm.
It was you were punished. It was punishable by death to talk about what you saw at Eleusis. Like they would kill you if you talked about it. But I mean,
Wow.
that's one of the craziest things about the mysteries at Eleusis is that nobody talked about it. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you went,
Wow.
but a part of that is because you can't talk about it. Words just
Right.
fail anyways. Like you can't even talk about it anyway. So it's like really,
Right.
but
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
and we lost a lot of literature
Yeah.
from the
Yeah.
Greek world. Like he
Mm-hmm.
brings that up too, like with the Greek playwrights, right? Like I'm not going to be able. So like Euripides, right?
Uh-huh.
We have like 7 of his plays, and we know there were like 100 of them, and it's like that for all of the Greek plays, like Sophocles. What are the other ones? Aeschylus,
Mm.
and there's
Mm-hmm.
another big one, I think. But all those Greek playwrights, we have
Mm-hmm.
like at best like 10% of the prolific writing, right?
Right.
So it's like,
Yeah.
mm,
Yeah. And the inability to record. And you're saying that even when we did have record, that was much of that was lost because of
us,
was it
yeah,
the Alexandria? Was it what happened in Alexandria with the burning? Was that where
yeah,
it,
that's
or
brought up,
just,
yeah,
yeah.
the burning of the
Mm.
library.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I was what I was referring to was how tight-lipped everybody was about what happened at Eleusis and how we don't know. And like the point
Right.
is, had we had all of the right, because a lot of what we do know is like from the plays that were written by the
Right. Yeah.
like
And even
Euripides
like,
and
right. And like Plato's conversations in the Symposium, Aristophanes and like he has these conversations with some of the other Greek thinkers that are illustrated through the Platonic works.
right.
So yeah, so it's
So we have a lot more of
yeah.
that, like Aristotle and
Mm.
Plato and what they wrote, right? But the playwrights is where we
Mhm.
get most
Mhm.
of like Greek spiritual religious practices. What we know about it
Mm.
outside of
Mhm.
like the archaeological evidence, right,
Mhm.
is
Mhm.
is from the is from the Greek playwrights. And
Yeah.
we only
Yeah.
have like a small percentage of that. So the point is, if we had all of it, we may know a lot more about what actually happened in Eleusis, because a lot of the clues we
Ah.
have are from those plays.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Right. That's interesting. That's wild, really. And so yeah, it does remain somewhat mysterious, but and then that of course just makes me think of Hecate, right? Because of the, the shrouded nature of the moon, and she plays a part in the mysteries too, right?
Uh huh.
Um,
Yeah. Because
and
after Persephone gives birth
mm,
to uh to Dionysus,
hmm
Hecate is an interesting one because she's one of the oldest deities in the Greek
mm,
pantheon, and is in
hmm
fact young in some of the myth of Hecate. Like she was one of them. She's the daughter of Zeus and Hera,
uh-huh,
and uh, for whatever reason she finds herself in the company of a woman who gives birth, and then because of that she's like soiled and can't go back to Olympus, something like that. Um,
wow, wow,
but yeah, she's
huh.
part of the whole Eleusinian mysteries because basically Demeter, Persephone, and Hecate are the same individual,
Mm,
just
hmm
different stages, and all of those
right.
stages are
But
seen in this myth.
well, they are, yes, they are, and I'm not to contradict that, but in terms of like the roles that they play, right? Within, so the larger unity of identity is that they are all aspects of the same. But doesn't Hecate, like, isn't she, in terms of her role, she's more like, um, doesn't she like help Demeter look for Persephone, or I don't, and then is
Yeah,
kind of,
she tells her
mm,
about who, like, I think she tells her like Apollo saw what happened, and like, yeah, she's part of like the disclosure to Demeter. As is
Right. Yeah.
Triptolemus, but that again, it's like, what myth are you, like, what
True.
what are you
Yeah.
reading? Because there's different tellings
Right. And
of
but
the
in
myth.
terms of yes, true. But in terms of like the archetype, she is like a connective agent that is in some ways playing a supportive role to the drama of Demeter and Persephone as it plays out, kind of true to the symbolism of the moon in a way, and the nature of the moon, and the nature of like the oscillation of emotions and being able to move through different states of reality in a way that is going to bring some kind of integration. Where if we're talking about like themes of like death and rebirth, and going into hell and coming back out, and having psychic ritualistic breakdowns of the conscious ego, there's got to be some kind of place and way of holding that space. And I think of the moon, and I think of Hecate in that way, kind of. But
So
yeah.
Hecate is like the crone.
Mm-hmm.
So like you become the Hecate phase happens like menopause. After
Uh-huh.
that transformation
Uh-huh.
is like the transformation into, but it also, you see also at least in Greek times, it's like when you become a grandmother, it's the stage of
Right.
like you become the grandmother, but there's also there's an association with the birth process, but
Yeah.
also another good way that I have found
Look what's on the bottom of my deck, Aaron.
is that the moon.
Yes. And that's
Yeah,
exactly the
that's
one I was
Hecate.
looking for, because I wanted to show you, because it's the three faces. In the
Uh-huh.
Greek mythic, it's the three faces of Hecate. And so you're exactly right, but there is a maiden, there is
Well, and that's
a maiden.
Cerberus there, the
Uh-huh.
dog,
Right.
the dog of Hades, the triple
Yeah.
faced dog. The black
Mhm.
bitch is another name for Hecate, actually.
Wow. And speaking of like the threat to the masculine and Christianity, I mean, the moon is something that many people who do consider themselves to be connected to, call themselves witches, or that they're very connected to the moon and the symbolism there. But her faces of maid, maiden, and crone, and just, yeah, it just made me think of that, because even within that, she's got the several aspects, because there's a transition of the feminine, right? Like, but yeah.
So just to kind of close the loop from what I
Yeah.
was saying anyway, one
Yeah,
thing
yeah.
I think I've recently sort of realized is that
Uh-huh.
like the fates or the Erinyes, especially the Furies, that face is more of a Hecatean, I guess you would say, face of the triple goddess. Is Hecate is more associated with the Furies.
Ah. Hmm.
That's the dark aspect of the feminine.
Interesting. Okay. So the Furies.
And then you can see with Athena, and what does Athena do? She persuades the Furies and their anger. She tempers it by giving them a place of worship, right? By saying, we're here, this is your temple, we're going to honor you, right? But Athena herself is is a goddess,
Right.
but she happens to come right from Zeus's head. So it's like all
Right.
these things. None of this is simple.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
thing. None of this, even with like the books I'm reading on Eleusis and the myth of Eleusis and what the myth of Demeter and all these figures and what all it means and how it's associated with like with the agrarian cycle and grain, because it's the central like allegory, or the central symbol here is the grain,
Right.
right? And the life cycle of grain. And well, the seed falls in, it's under the earth. It goes under the earth and then is reborn. That's Dionysus, right? The seed is reborn under the ground in Hades and comes back up. So, but understanding how all of this allegory and myth and symbolism relates to the human life cycle and what the Greeks were saying with these myths. It's very complicated. It's complex. It's not easy to understand. I'm trying, but like it's like even these books I'm reading where it's explicitly stating like this is what this means. It's still like, well, how does it mean that? It's still complicated.
Right. Yeah. 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 It makes me really wonder, and I'd have to research, of course, but I'm curious of whether like Jungian theory or like Jung had a lot to say or explored much of that, and not that it would be like the end all be all, but just kind of that idea of the descent into the underworld and what's happening psychologically and how that is part of the individuation process or the move toward wholeness that requires the death of ego or the transformation of and the loss of. And you're talking about like Demeter as being a central figure and the grain. What do you make of the grain? What do you think?
What do I
Does
make
that?
of it?
Yeah, I just kind of
Well,
wonder. Yeah.
Well, the importance of it is is essentially the shift from hunter gatherer to agriculturalist, aka cities, like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
culture, right?
Yeah.
Hunter gatherers, they have a culture, but it's not. The city is different. It's like
Right.
a petri dish for humanity,
Yeah.
Whereas
Yeah.
hunter gatherers, there's no fermentation happening, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
just you go where the wind blows you.
Yeah.
You follow the cycles of nature. It's a simpler um engagement
Right.
with it's natural,
Yeah.
right? It's not complicated by the new sphere. It's not complicated by the human mind.
Mm-hmm.
Necessity rules.
Mm-hmm.
And you see that's one of the big differences, with early astrology and the psychological humanistic astrology. I mean, it's not fated anymore,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
We have choice, you
Right.
know. Um, so and yeah, the grain though, to take it back to your question, it's like the grain is so important then because it was why we stopped being nomads. And so it's
Mm-hmm.
reflected in the
Mm-hmm.
spirituality. Because you got to think
Right.
about the
Right.
life way. It's a whole nother way of being on the planet. Whole
Yeah.
nother way. It's like a whole nother phase of the human experience. Shifting from
Right.
hunter gathering to staying in place. You're still at the mercy of nature, but we're
Mm-hmm.
domesticated now. We're living a
Mm-hmm.
domesticated natural lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think of like Demeter and the stability and the sensuality and the earth energy of abundance and, like very physical, sensual, stable energy or archetype. And then that complete and absolute rupture, like in terms of, in psychological terms, it's like the rupture to that is the initiation to go deeper into from like Taurus world into Scorpio world. And so but the
Definitely.
initiation has to come through oftentimes really painful experiences like loss, trauma, depression, childbirth, divorce, obsession. It's like all the things that may be triggers to going into the unconscious or going into the shadow realm or going into what is like deeply buried in the subconscious. And so when you're describing even like the nature of reality or of society going from hunter gatherer and nomadic to then centralized, there's sort of a parallel to the way that when we go through a Pluto experience or initiation, that we, in some ways, it's this opportunity to find a centralization within our own identity and a groundedness, but it's through like the fire of the, the fucking shitstorm of Hades, um, and then what the magic that happens there, because you were mentioning yesterday about Pluton, right? Did you say Pluton is associated with
Purple, the color purple.
Okay, yeah, and earlier you mentioned
Demeter,
this, and
one of Demeter's name. Yeah, one of Demeter's
one of her
names is
names.
Pluton.
Okay, I couldn't remember if it was Persephone or Demeter that you mentioned as having that, and his name is connected to that because it means like hidden wealth, right? And this is hidden again, the nature of like what is not revealed, but it's wealth.
So yeah, there's two things kind of going on there because like the Pluton is Greek. Plutus, I believe, is the Latin. But Pluton in Greek means purple. And ergot as a mushroom that grows on grain, it's black on the grain. It falls to the ground. Right? And then and then after the rains, the mushroom pops up. The mushrooms are purple.
Well, but I would be interested to check more deeply into Pluton because I thought it also meant wealth, even though, and I'm wondering if purple and
Plutus, yeah, that would be the Latin.
Okay, Okay, but does Pluton not mean wealth in any? I mean, I know it means purple, but does it not?
Well, I'm saying I think that the Latin word means like hidden wealth. And the Greek word supposedly means purple, but there's an association between the two. Is what I'm saying. There's two
I was going to
different.
say, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so and that's more clear to me now. I understand what you're saying. So because I'm like, okay, purple and wealth, those two are often very
Royalty.
closely. Yeah, absolutely, yeah. But it's not the same kind of wealth as say prosperous grains on the surface of things, you know. It's like,
well, yeah, but that wealth is like the wealth of the seed under the ground. That's why I said like the mushrooms are purple in color.
Yeah.
That would have sprouted like from the seed. Now it's not the case, right? Because they're sprouting from spores. They grew on the grain. Which again, that's what I was talking about, how complicated all the symbolism is. And but the color purple, it is that color because of this ergot and the mushroom that it makes and the color of that mushroom.
Yeah.
It's really the root of Pluto.
Right. And that's fascinating to me because of the nature of mycelium and mushrooms themselves.
Yeah.
The connective facilities and functions of mycelium and the underground network of energetic, like it's associated with like deep nurturing of the environment underground. You know, they do a lot of like reconstructive and reconstitutional types of energy for their ecosystem, you know, for
they eat the dead.
Yes. Good. Yes.
That's what mushrooms do. It's the final stage in the alchemical process of life on Earth.
Right.
It's the end and the beginning.
Touche. Yes.
Yeah. And that's why it's such a powerful symbol and what they were up to in Eleusis. Like it's this literally, that's why I was like, wow, the mushrooms are purple. Like, that are responsible for the mysteries. Like, and Demeter is associated with purple, as is Pluto, as is Persephone, as is Hecate. I mean, she's more black, but I mean, still, it's like, you know.
Yeah.
So and then, you know, the stoned ape theory, right? Like the idea that the mycelium is the reason why we evolved the higher brain.
Oh, okay. I do feel like you may have mentioned that at some point, but okay. Yeah, very cool. That's very, very interesting.
Yeah,
idea.
the cerebral cortex, there's a theory like it evolved due to these, you know, primitive, you know, whatever we were when we were apes, before we were Homo sapiens. Like what made us, what the change, and also it's logos. Like we switched from being an ape to being a human with language. And what caused that to happen? Well, there's a theory that it was the ape ate a mushroom the
Mhm.
mushroom gave us speech,
Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
language.
Right. Yeah. And so in a way though, like the mysteries and the idea of something like purple mushrooms being connected to this process, it was like that was one component of what the mysteries were all about, right? I mean, the Kaikion, am I saying that right?
I think Kukion, there's,
Kukion.
yeah, you may be able to say it both ways. So I know
Uh-huh.
that Brian Muraresku says it properly. He reads the book, so I might go back and look. I'm pretty sure he says Kukion, but there's two
Okay.
spellings. I think the Latin version is Kykeon,
Mm-hmm.
and the Greek is
Mm-hmm.
Kukeon. Of course, in the Greek, with the Greek alphabet, it's not the English alphabet, so it's like, I think
Right,
you can say it
right.
either way, Kykeon or
Uh-huh.
Kukion.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, so and when I did like a quick search, it looked like there were like different stages. Now, I don't know much about this, but just kind of broad strokes that part of the rituals were connected to something like a process called dramina. Have you heard of anything along those lines?
Uh huh.
Um, and it's like the rituals that they did, and then like the fasting that they did to prepare
Uh
for
huh.
maybe, and then how like just on a somatic like body level, there was a lot of prep. Just like if you were going to go on
Uh
an
huh.
ayahuasca ceremony today, you'd have to do certain dietary and maybe fasting or and so that like that's like the beginning part, and then moving into like they I don't know if you know much because I definitely do not. I mean, I'm very much in over my head with this, and this is so fascinating to me. But it's like the idea of what they did. They have like incantations, or did they have? I'm curious about that because it mentions something like legomena, or like sacred utterances in the mythical narration of what was happening. It's kind of like, I guess, telling the story along with what they're going through so that it gives meaning to the experience, maybe. And then that there was usually like oh my God, I'm butchering it. But there's a third stage, dyknemena, and that was like a revelatory, like revelation that couldn't be described, which also sounds like a lot like um, a psychedelic experience,
Yep.
Um,
Which would have
so,
probably been that would have been the final stage where you take the Kukion and have this
Mm-hmm.
revelatory experience. That's the
Mm-hmm.
end of the mysteries, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
I think they fasted for like, God, I can't say. I know it's a period of time, 3 days, 7 days, something like that. And I know that you walked from Athens to Eleusis, and it was a 13-mile sort of pilgrimage. But yeah, there
Wow.
was a process of purification, and I think
Yeah.
you had to go to the ocean and wash yourself off. It was a, ritual like
Yeah.
that for
Mm-hmm.
thousands of years that evolved over thousands of years. So yeah, there was a lot of technical, ritualistic components to this. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I've read
That's really
about a
cool.
good bit of that, especially in, the road to Eleusis goes into a lot of that.
Does it?
But
Uh-huh.
I'm
Uh-huh.
not. Yeah, I was just gonna browbeat myself with humility and point
Yeah.
out that I'm a college dropout, as I like to do.
oh yeah, this yeah, you're disqualifying yourself even though you've already
Yeah.
qualified. Yeah, your
Uh,
usual.
yeah, that's that Jupiter Virgo, Saturn
Yeah.
Virgo, Mars Virgo
Yes,
in the fourth.
that's right.
Um,
That's right.
but I'm cool with humility. I want to be humble, so whatever.
Yeah. You'd
But
rather err on the side of too humble than too arrogant.
exactly. But what I was pointing out is that like a statement I made earlier, where if I know if I would have liked to have studied the book I'm reading beyond just highlighting,
Yeah.
right? As in
Yeah.
take notes,
Right.
with a podcast in mind, so that I can
Yeah.
talk intelligently about this stuff, because a lot of these words and a lot of the details, right? Because I'm not, in fact, studying for a college class on the Eleusinian Mysteries, where I'm
Right.
actually required to take a test and know all these details, right? So it's like, that's the difference. What I'm saying, the difference between polished, like college academic, and a rogue intellect like myself,
Yeah.
where I'm just reading all these books, but not
Yeah.
and highlighting, but then not going back and writing everything down in notes.
Yeah.
I do that sometimes.